grief is one of the rawest expressions of humanity we can feel. And we all feel it. After all, it's the shared experience of loss and loss that connects us to one another. And yet, we suck at talking about her. This is one of the most frustrating things that I learned after my mom died. No one knew what to say. I didn't know where to look. The only thing I'd heard about was the 5 stages of grief, and I didn't relate to a single one of them. So I've developed a framework for how I understand grief based on my experience, recognizing that yes, grief is individual and it's nonlinear, but it doesn't have to be so isolating. So first, there's survival mode. The emotions are overwhelming, all-consuming. You simply forget how to exist. Some people manage this by jumping into planning mode. Others simply shut down. It's as though your cognitive and regulatory abilities just disappeared. And then, after the initial shock has faded, the flowers have wilted, and the texts have slowed, you enter this sort of liminal state where you're still off autopilot, but you're readying yourself to reintegrate into society, recognizing that the world doesn't stop, even if yours has. It's here I feel we are presented with 2 options. Option 1 is to reintegrate, to retrofit yourself back into your pre-loss identities. Maybe you suppress the grief. Maybe you numb it or avoid it. Whatever you need to do in order to pick up the pieces and resume. Option 2 is we realize we can't pick up the pieces and resume. And so we take this unexpressed love with nowhere to go, because that's just what grief is, and we redirect it inward, taking ourselves off autopilot to begin an entirely new journey of healing and rerouting. Option 2 is a painful, lifelong landmark, but it's transformative. Transformation through suffering is not a new phenomenon. Everyone from the late Thich Nhat Hanh to Anderson Cooper talks about this idea that grief changes you. But what if it doesn't change you? What if it actually frees you? Sets you free to discover your inner being? What if uprooting is the very way to find your internal roots? It certainly was for me. It was September 15, 2019. I was driving back to Boston, where I had just started graduate school at Tufts University, when I called my mom, as I did daily. Immediately, I noticed that her voice sounded distant, weak. "Lesley, I'm in the hospital. Your dad took me for a severe stomach ache, but the doctors say I'm very dehydrated, and they think that they found lesions on my liver and my spleen, so they're going to do a biopsy." I was frozen, tears streaming down my face. I asked her if I should fly home that day. She said that was silly. She'd be out in the morning. That was the last time I heard her voice. At the time, death really didn't seem like an outcome. I thought, worst case, I was going to drop out of graduate school, move home to take care of her. 2 excruciating days later, death very much seemed like an outcome. The prognosis was constantly changing. The doctors didn't know what was going on. My dad, sisters, and I were in constant communication, waiting in agony for updates. That afternoon, I had a 2-hour, strictly no-phone seminar. When I got out of class, I had 17 missed calls and voicemails from my dad. "Lesley, you need to get on the next flight out of Boston. Honey, I can't believe I'm saying this, but your mom might not make it through the night." The next hour is a blur as I sprinted home, grabbed whatever clothes I saw on site, booked a flight in the Uber on the way to the airport, ran through the airport to catch that flight, the last one to Chattanooga that afternoon with the layover in LaGuardia, landed in LaGuardia, I ran straight to my mom's friends with the words on my mouth for the first time. "My mom's in the hospital. She might not make it through the night." And they comforted me as we boarded the flight from LaGuardia to Chattanooga, but it didn't take off. We deplaned. The pilot was, we'd try again in the morning. In hysterics, I called the nurse's office every quarter hour that night looking for updates. Around 2 a.m., she told me my mom was improving, that I could get some sleep. I'd see her in the morning. So I did. At 3 a.m., my mom was put on life support. I never really got to say goodbye. But I didn't know that. So the entire flight from LaGuardia to Chattanooga, I'm trying to bargain with God. Like, look, I will go to church every single week if you will just keep her alive. Please, she was so healthy last week. What happened this one? When I landed, I found out it was too late, that I was going to say goodbye. She died that afternoon of stage 4 cancer that had taken over her body. Cancer no one knew she had. We got the biopsy post-mortem. It broke me. My mom was my best friend. She was my safe space. I went straight into survival mode. I couldn't remember to eat until I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't sleep unless I was heavily medicated. I couldn't socialize or be around people, so I would just cry through the halls, surrounded by an almost sea of strangers. I lost control of my physical body, resulting in a massive ass bruise, like quite literally this big, on my ass. Styes from stress and tears, and staph infection from a busted face. It's as though I was an infant version of myself. But I had to know what happened. So I pored over her medical records looking for answers. Quickly realized that I couldn't save her regardless. The question that was plaguing my mind, though, was if this is what happened to my mom, she was 54 years old, rarely sick, had played in 2 national tennis tournaments the week before, then what was happening to everyone else? And how could I help people live longer, healthier lives? This question dominated the next 3 years and ultimately has become my life's work. I switched my studies from international affairs to public health, started looking into health insurance, thinking that if I could solve cost and access, maybe I could improve things. But the further I dug, the less convinced I became. So I started thinking outside the doctor's office. This idea called the social determinants of health, that where we live, work, and play impacts our life expectancy. At the same time, I was trying to survive and get through graduate school, so I started rerouting my classes towards my mom. In public speaking class, for example, my peers gave speeches on foreign affairs. I talked about death and grief. A really funny classmate, let me tell you. And a few months go by, and suddenly I'm starting to feel like I can reintegrate and return back to normalcy. And then COVID hits. And I'm back in Chattanooga, flooded by the memories of my mom, drowning in my grief. It was tough, but I tried to find gratitude, grateful that we had been able to properly mourn her, something that so many others couldn't do at that time, and that my mom, Lisa Brock, hadn't suffered from COVID. She didn't even know what COVID was. So I mourned for those that couldn't mourn, whose losses were told in numbers and not names. Because of COVID, I started thinking about the impact of politics on health. Social determinants are just policies. They don't show up overnight. And policies are just decisions made by politicians, people that we vote into office. What if, by extension, voting is a determinant of health? When I returned back to Boston in fall of 2020, this is where I started my research. I created a national compendium, a county-level voting index, to analyze the impact of voting on health. And what I found was that there's significantly more than impact. Emboldened by my research, I decided to pursue a second master's, this time in public health. In fall of 2021, I enrolled at Harvard School of Public Health. Now, let me tell you, I'm kind of feeling pretty good at this point. I'm 2 years post-grief, and I learned to kind of manage my grief. I had a boyfriend I adored, a strong group of friends. Boston was reopening after being in lockdown, and I was at my dream school studying something I was super passionate about. But the exuberance didn't last. Suddenly, my relationship ended. I couldn't find a strong enough community, and I was feeling really disengaged from my studies. So I turned to partying and dating and scrolling to numb and avoid the pain, once again uprooted by grief. It didn't work. So a few months later, single, stuck, days away from my 30th birthday, I did something kind of crazy. I booked an astrologer. To clarify, I have been looking for a grief specialist for years. I haven't been able to find one, so I had gone the traditional therapy route, and it hadn't quite worked out for me yet. One therapist told me that I need more than her, which isn't exactly what you want to hear from your therapist. Another said, you sound depressed, which, fair, but kind of harsh delivery, my guy. The most recent one had asked me if I was dense because I was violently sobbing that it was slowing my speech. I'm actually at Harvard, you asshole. But also, why does that matter? So, booking the astrologer was my Hail Mary play. I had two goals. One, I wanted to know when I would meet someone. And two, I was deciding between taking these professionally required courses for a career in government or more personally fulfilling ones. So the reading started, and Katie, the astrologer, pulled my chart. She said, "You're going to meet someone around the age of 33. Hey, Katie, I'm 33. And then she turned to my career insights. She said, "You have a lot of medicine, leadership, and healing in your future." Oh, great, I told her. I'm actually getting my master's in public health. I plan to move back to DC to pursue a career in federal government. I'm kind of thinking about running for office. Is that what leadership means? Is it Congress? Katie paused before she responded. No, it's more like witchy seance vibes. Witchy seance vibes? What do you mean witchy seance vibes? I've been in school for 3 years. I'm trying to go to Capitol Hill and make laws, not Santa Monica Pier and make predictions. I dismissed the reading outright, laughed about it with my friends. But the truth is, those words kind of freed me. I dropped the professionally required courses, and I enrolled in the personally fulfilling ones. Through those, I learned to lean into my grief rather than trying to manage it. The grief was something to understand, transmute, even enjoy. I learned to follow my grief, to see it as a guide rather than letting it chase me. A few months later, I'm driving back to Chattanooga post-graduation when it hits me. Through COVID, grief, and my studies, I learned about how the personal impacts the professional, that mental blocks and anxieties, if left unaddressed, can show up in our professional decision-making. Congress, politicians, they're just people. Except that their professional decision-making impacts our health. So what if there was a way that I could address those mental blocks and anxieties before they show up in their decision-making, aka our policies? I started meeting with life coaches, reading books on therapy, neither of which really resonated. Surely nothing to do with my own experience. And then I thought about my reading. What if this weird pseudoscience had something to say? Well, turns out it did. There's a data point in astrological Chiron that quite literally pinpoints a person's mental blocks and anxieties. I have Chiron in Leo in my 11th house of community, meaning that I have a fear of being seen. But knowing that is actually so free because I see this fear not as a block, but as something to move through. So I push myself to be in situations where I'm seen, whether it's creating content or speaking up in groups or applying to talks like these. I wanted to work with politicians, but given DC's political gridlock, I decided to start with individuals. I treated astrology with the same rigor and discipline I had in my graduate studies. For several months, I read hundreds of books and took hours of online classes. In May of 2020, I gave my first reading. I haven't stopped since. The results were astounding. Astrology is just data, individual to each person. It's a blueprint for understanding how you make decisions and your innate gifts. It's a roadmap for how to navigate life's transitions, big and small, whether career, relationship, retirement, conversations, routines, and interests. It's a compass for knowing who you are and how to get there. I don't work with politicians yet, but I do apply this framework to politics. So in the county courthouse, for example, I know which sign the moon is in based on the room's environment. When the moon is in Aries, trials are short, they're emotional, terse. They probably appeared the same day on the docket that they're heard. When the moon is in Virgo, trials are evidence-based, they're more deliberate. They've been rescheduled for several weeks. I know I'm going to be there for hours. When Senator Cory Booker broke the longest held filibuster record this spring, he was entering his nodal return, a point in which someone started to cement their legacy. And it was happening in his third house of communication, meetings that he was meant to speak that day. When I saw that Saturn would be crossing to Donald Trump's ninth house of spiritual learning, I predicted that he was going to be feeling and exhibiting some sort of religious fear and anxiety. A few months later, he started talking about his concerns of not getting into heaven. Astrology, like grief, is a lifelong practice. Both are constantly evolving for me. But what I am learning and understanding is my role in the world. That for me, medicine, leadership, and healing means that I can take my research and knowledge and experiences and share it with those around me to help them through their own lives, personally, professionally, individually, and collectively. It's given me the gift of being able to come off autopilot, to heal and reroute, not in the way that I or society thought I should, but in the way that I need it. I've been talking a lot about the sharp pain of losing someone. The truth is, grief happens daily. Whether it's breakups that feel like a loss, job failures that feel like an identity crisis, the loss of pets that feel like family. Each time, we're presented with this choice to reintegrate or to come off autopilot and heal and reroute. You see a broken heart as an opportunity to explore rather than a pain to numb. So I want to give you the gift that the astrologer gave me to choose option 2, to feel feelings of joy without guilt and tears without shame, to do something personally fulfilling, even if it feels impractical, to rest, to validate your own suffering, even if it feels like someone else's is worse, to sit in silence, listen to what comes up, record those findings, to follow your grief, see it as a guide rather than letting it chase you, to come off autopilot and find your astrology. I want to close with a thought and a question. After COVID, we reintegrated back to society, returning to the ways things were picking up and resuming. But society feels a lot different than it did before COVID, like more costly, inflated version of itself. Mental health crises have skyrocketed. There's widespread cognitive decline and social skills have atrophied. We are the most technologically connected we've ever been. And yet, this country suffers from a loneliness epidemic. So what if we had chosen option 2? Recognizing that COVID fundamentally changed us, individually and collectively, and we can't go back to the way things were. Instead of trying to retrofit into our pre-loss identities, what if we chose to heal and reroute? And what would it look like for you, for us, to choose option 2 now? Thank you.